right, and welcome back. Obviously, the economy has taken center stage during this campaign cycle, and it could, in the end, be the deciding factor of this election. But we can't ignore the wars. We can't ignore the dysfunction in our government, as Congress has recorded its lowest approval rating ever of just 10%. And we can't ignore this idea that our government is turning on us with its response to grassroots movements like Occupy and the rise of surveillance, and the recently passed National Defense Authorization Act, which includes Section 1021, allowing for the indefinite detention of American citizens.
That's right. There are serious problems this election day that need more attention. So let's talk about them. And to do that, we're joined now by a host of Breaking the Set, Abby Martin, as well as the Breaking the Set producer, Manuel Rapolo. Manny joins us from Florida. Hey there, Manny.
Hi, Megan. How are you?
Manny, I'm going to go ahead and start off with you since you are in Florida. Let's go ahead and talk about what you're seeing down there. And as far as the immigration goes, let's go that direction first and talk about immigration and sort of the crisis that we're seeing with immigration.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because when we're talking about immigration, Florida is one of those states where it really doesn't matter. Obama's got kind of a tough hand that he's being dealt in Florida. Personally, I really just, from the sense that I get on the ground talking to people here, it could still go either way. The latest polls show 48% in favor of Obama, 48% still in favor of Romney. So at this point, it could still be a toss-up. But you're asking specifically about immigration. Well, immigration policy in Florida is almost irrelevant, seeing as how the largest Hispanic communities in Florida are Cuban immigrants and Puerto Ricans that live in the United States, and they're absolutely exempt. These sort of immigration laws don't really matter to them. So Florida is one of those states where it's, you know, it's really tough to kind of get the Hispanic vote when your only policy that you're running on as far as your campaign is immigration reform, something that people here simply don't care about. However, Obama, throughout the course of the campaign, has had well over 200,000 volunteers campaigning for him. So that could be a real game changer at the end of the day as well. So like I said earlier, it's a virtual tie here in Florida, and with 29 electorate votes, it could still be up in the air at this point.
Well, immigration is an issue that no one is, I mean, there's been talk of it, but Congress is not moving at all on immigration at all. Is that something?
Absolutely, no.
Go ahead, Manny.
I completely agree. No, I think that this is something that's very important. We've seen rallies about this over and over and over again throughout the last 4 years, and even before that, for some sort of immigration policy to come out of the Obama administration. It seemed like there would be some sort of real push for real immigration reform here in this country, but we haven't seen it. The problem is that both candidates seem to actually be in line with this. Now, the question is, will we see this as a result of an Obama 2.0 presidency or from Mitt Romney? That's the real question to be had. But at the end of the day, it really almost seems like we're not going to get an answer from either candidate. And it's almost the same story with a lot of these issues, not only with immigration, but with defense, with surveillance, with a whole host of other issues. But immigration is definitely one of those important issues. Unfortunately, Florida is not the kind of state that you can expect to see being a deciding factor on that type of immigration policy.
And Manny, one of the interesting things that we have seen come out of the President Obama administration is the DREAM Act, and one of the caveats is whether those people are, if they can have some type of temporary citizenship if they're willing to fight in wars. So let's go ahead and switch the conversation to wars, since no one else is really talking about them this election. And Abby, I'll go ahead and address this question to you. One of the trademarks of the Obama administration is his drone campaign. Why is nobody talking about the drone campaign and only got 1 or 2 mentions in the official presidential debates?
Well, no one's talking about it because both him and Romney, as you saw, when the question was proposed, Romney basically just agreed with it. He said, I absolutely agree with Obama's policy on these drone wars. The problem with the drone wars, people think that they're strategic, they're surgically precise, but what we've seen out of that new report that just came out of the ground in Pakistan is that that's absolutely not the case. Not only do they have a 98% failure rate, but they're the leading cause of anti-American sentiment in the region. We just saw the foreign minister of Pakistan saying the #1 reason why people dislike America, and that's growing, is because of drones. Suicide bombings have increased over 300% since we started the drone campaign in Pakistan, and that's just Pakistan, not to mention the shadow wars in Yemen, Libya. Of course, we're still using drones in Afghanistan. So it is a very scary climate when you look at the fact that both are completely in line.
Well, and we know that those
wars.
drones are coming back to the U.S. as far as surveillance drones. Obviously, we don't have Predator drones flying around except
Not
for
yet.
our borders. But go ahead and talk about the surveillance state and the type of things, the types of changes changes that we've seen as far as drone surveillance and other surveillance programs.
Well, the reason,
Before you guys go onto surveillance, if I could interject, I'm sorry. I completely agree with what Abby said, but just as an added note, it's interesting that a majority of Americans actually support using drones abroad, and more than half of Americans actually support surveillance drones here in the United States. And I think that part of the reason that that's so is that most people just are
do
detached.
they? Do a majority of Americans support surveillance drones in the U.S., Manny?
Well, I mean, polling shows that, and I'm not saying that I'm one of these Americans that supports surveillance drones, but I think that that just shows how detached a lot of people are from the reality of this. The reality that using drones abroad carry negative consequences and it builds negative ideas towards the United States. And the fact that more Americans don't see that and they're so detached to that, that's part of the problem. And that's why we continue to see their use.
And Manny, I think you're getting at something here, and I think this is why the president has expanded this drone warfare program, is that optically it looks a lot better than 80,000 U.S. soldiers stationed in Pakistan. Just have a couple dozen drones flying around. In the long run, whether or not that's good for our goals in the region or what we want to do when it comes to the quote-unquote war on terror, that remains to be seen, and it might be causing a lot more problems than are being
And I think
solved
Abby
by it.
answered your question for you with a 2% success rate. I really don't see that as achieving any sort of operative objectives.
When it comes to war in general, though, and Abby, I want to direct this to you, when it comes to war in general, both parties have pretty much been on board with our wars throughout history. Going all the way back, I think the War of 1812 was the most partisan war we've ever fought. Ever since then, it's been pretty much bipartisan support for every war, all the way, most recently, Afghanistan and Iraq. So is there a problem with both parties when it comes to empire, when it comes to trying to expand military influence around the world? And do we have to ask ourselves a tough question? Are we willing to live in a world in which the United States is not the military empire? Are we comfortable with that idea?
I'm certainly comfortable with it. That's what I try to advocate for.
Could a politician advocate for that, though, given...
I think, yeah, Sam, I think a lot of people, you're right. I think we're in this false paradigm where we think that we need to manage the empire in different ways. You have the Democratic Party trying to offer to manage the empire in a more humane way, where you have NATO involved. You have these drone bombings, which is more humanitarian. And then you have, of course, the neoconservative, hawkish establishment that's trying to just do full-out, ground wars and nation building totally openly, unabashed. So people are trapped in this false choice where they think that they need to either manage the empire in certain ways when no one is out there asking the question, do we need an empire? Do we need to be doing these things around the world? And certainly I think that a politician can be up there. That's why Ron Paul was so popular. His ideas of non-interventionism, scaling back these ground wars. I think people see an empire and they see that it's unsustainable. Having an empire is completely unsustainable when you're looking at the economy and how to manage the resources in this country. It will always fall, especially the arrogant ones.
So maybe we should look at the Dutch and the French and the British for what life can be like post-empire.
And I do also want to ask you, because we do know that the economy back during World War II really rebounded when a war was happening. They had more manufacturing, people were more active. And so there's been arguments that maybe this war economy can get the U.S. back on track, but that's not what we've seen over the past 10 years, right, Manny?
Look at World War II. You just mentioned World War II. World War II was an escalation. First of all, it was not a war of aggression. The United States was drawn into World War II. It was helping its allies in Europe. The war was paid for in war bonds. The United States has involved itself in two large-scale wars. Afghanistan, the largest war in U.S. history, has pretty much bankrupted this country. And the largest falsity here, the biggest illusion that we're faced with is as if Americans, we've got a curtain pulled over our eyes, making us think that we have two choices. One choice, that we have a really big military and we're going to continue wars, and another choice where we have an even bigger military and we're still going to continue the wars. And Abby brought the case of Ron Paul, and that's another, I mean, Ron Paul is a very excellent example of how we do have options in this country. The thing is that we have other options that are not just Ron Paul. We have other parties in this country that are viable parties, and as long as we continue to exclude them from the debate, that we're going to continue this system where we think that we have options and we really, really don't.
Well, Manny had a great point when he was bringing up World War II. I mean, but think about World War II. Yeah, we were all rallying together as a country to, conserving rubber, having these victory gardens. Now, when we have a war, it's like, go shop. I mean, the mentality is completely different. We're not rallying together as a country when there was actually a legitimate threat that people could argue for in World War II. Now it's just this threat that's manufactured to sustain our war economy that is not sustainable.
Right. We've sort of made a deal with the gods of war here to depend our economy on war. But it seems like we could, instead of building tanks, we could, you know, reinvent our energy grid and make more efficient housing and buildings and stuff like
Brilliant.
that. 15 seconds left. A few hours ago, the only people who are talking about that are third-party candidates. Is a third-party candidate worth voting knowing they can't win? We just have 15 seconds left.
Absolutely, because I think that, as Matt Stoller articulated, that we should be voicing our opposition against the mandate for endless war, the surveillance state, and the police state here at home. And if we vote for the two-party establishment, that's the mandate that we'll give.
Thank you. Manny Rapallo, Abby Martin, breaking the set.
I completely concur. All I have to add is, yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Manny. And keep giving us
Thanks,
some
guys.
updates from
Cheers.
Florida.